What radio? The music you want.
With your host, Keys Dan.
He's one of the 10 finest minds in the country.
Someday I hope to be two of them.
RadioWhat.com.
What's up, party people? It's Keys Dan with RadioWhat.com, DJLittleRock.com, coming to you live and in living color from the Radio What studios. And this is my podcast, What Makes You Famous? It's an extension of the RadioWhat.com internet radio station that I've been running for quite some time. And if you need DJ services, where do you go? DJLittleRock.com. Check availability and get a free price quote. And maybe you can have me at your next event. I like to party with the people. Today on the program, Rosanne Marie Plante. Yes, I said Plante. It makes me feel regal when I say it that way. You get to hear her story in your ears in the next few minutes. And stick around for that. Find out more about Rosanne Marie Plante. This week's shows on February 27th, Thursday. I'll be at the Old Post Barbecue for our Fat Thursday celebration. Yes, Fat Tuesday is this week, so I'll be spending the rest of the week doing little Fat Thursday and Fat Friday and maybe even, well, I guess February 29th is leap year, so that's a whole nother celebration. But Thursday, I'll be at the Old Post Barbecue in Russellville, Arkansas. The video dance party, karaoke jam, family friendly. Come on out from 6 to 9. They got great barbecue, and they got adult beverages in case you care to imbibe, if you're over 21, of course. But I keep the music family friendly, so bring everybody. It's a great after-school treat, great after-work treat. It's the Old Post Barbecue, Russellville, Arkansas. 6 to 9. Be there. And then on February 28th, it's the adults only party over at the Rab in Conway, Arkansas. Fat Friday. Yes, the Fat Tuesday celebration. I guess it's a Mardi Gras. It continues all week long, because I like to play. I want to hear some Zydeco music. I won't bore you with Zydeco music all night long, but I like to listen to it every once in a while. So you get to hear some Zydeco music, at least in the beginning, and hopefully some people get into it and dance a little bit. So that's at 8 p.m. in Conway, Arkansas, the Friday night, my usual Friday night gig at the Rab in Conway. They got the full bar, kitchen, pool tables. They got the pool tournament every Friday night. If you want to make some money while you're hanging out on Friday night, I encourage you to check that out. Foosball, shuffleboard on the party patio. They got darts. Drunk people with darts. Never could figure that one out. But all right. Hey, nobody's been injured seriously yet. They got a giant Jenga game, giant checkers game. There's always something to do while you're hanging out at the Rab waiting to sing on stage right next to little old me right there. That's 8 p.m. on Friday night, Conway, Arkansas, the Rab. And then on February 29th, leap year, I have a brand new place to go to. I've never been there before. It's called Trejos on the Lake. It's a Mexican restaurant in Hot Springs, Arkansas. So I'll be making the trek down to Hot Springs. It's only about an hour away. It's not that far, but that's from 7 to 11. I'll keep it family friendly as long as families are in there. But I think after a certain time, they kick all the kids out, so maybe we'll spice it up a little bit. But they definitely have the full bar, and from what I understand, great Mexican food. So come on down and play with me. And I think Clint Baggett, he drives an Uber from Morrilton. So if you want Clint Baggett to pick you up, either in Morrilton or Conway or all the way down, he could fit 7 people in his van, and he'll take you. He told me the other day that he'd take you down to Trejos in Hot Springs because he's been working in Hot Springs for the races down there. All right, now that you know where the shows are, the place to be, the place that you can get your sing on, let's have a chit-chat with Rosanne Marie Plante and find out more about her. Rosanne, let's call Rosanne Marie Plante now.
Hello, this is Rosanne.
Hey, Rosanne Marie Plante, I'm guessing?
Yes.
Hey, it's Keys Dan with the What Makes You Famous podcast. How you doing?
Hi. I'm great. How are you this evening?
Oh, I'm super fantastic. It's so good to hear your voice. You know,
Yeah.
I've been kind of stalking all your pages, and I'm looking over all the and we've already started.
Okay. I figured.
I'm looking through all your credits, and there's so much to unpack. You are so many different things. Rosanne Marie Plante, and hopefully I'm pronouncing that properly.
You are, yes. Very few do, so thank you.
Well, good. Saying Plante that way makes me feel so regal, and
There you go.
I'm guessing I have your husband to thank for that.
You do. Yes, that's my married name. Yes, you do.
Hooray, hooray. So who is a Rosanne Marie Plante?
Well, I probably, at the age that I am now, which is slightly mature, I would have to say probably I'm a Renaissance woman in the fact that I'm a very classic person. I have very traditional values and ideals. I like to say I'm still an idealist and an optimist, even in the world that we are living in. But I also have a cutting edge, meaning that I've accomplished a lot of the things that I've been able to do in my life by thinking outside the box. And so Renaissance and the fact that just like the Renaissance men that, in that part of history where they did great things by doing something different and experimental, I feel I'm the same way. I don't always accept the traditional way as the only way.
Well, Rosanne Marie Plante was a little girl, and I guess I'm just going to start just calling you Rosanne because I think I've said your name a few times. People,
that's fine.
People can find you. People can stalk you. People can find your various pages that you manage and that you are a part of. But Rosanne, let's see. You still really Renaissance. It gives me an idea of what kind of person you are, but in what aspect? Renaissance meaning that you get bored with certain things, or you want to always learn new things, or you want to keep your hands, your outlook broad. Is that what Renaissance is to you?
Yes, I guess. Yes, that is what Renaissance means. Is that I'm a lifelong learner. And I'm always interested in, and not only new things, but becoming an expert in the fields that I have an interest in, but also that I'm always expanding and thinking about how to do things better in a different way. And so a lot of people say that, it's a good friend of mine paid me a nice compliment, actually in a TV interview that I have coming up next week. Mm-hmm. And she said, there's the old saying, Jack of all trades, master of none, where she was so sweet and said, Jack of all trades, master of all. And so that's what I mean by Renaissance, is that I'm always looking at how to learn something new and expand out my knowledge and teach others at the same time.
Well, Mrs. Plante, if you're going to do it right. Go all the way.
That's right.
Yeah, and if I find something that I'm very interested in, I get obsessed with it. Mm-hmm. Example number one is this podcast. Yeah, I could do it once a week, once a month, but no, I decided maybe 3-4 times a week, and I want to have different conversations and learn from people. And today I'm learning from you, and I'm going to say your full name one more time, Rosanne Marie Plante. I'm learning from you. So you're an Iowa girl. That's what I can see on your Facebook. Is
absolutely
born and raised in Iowa.
Yes, in Sioux City, which is up in the northwest corner of the state. And there is a place in this. It's called Siouxland because we are right on the Iowa-Nebraska border. So you literally drive 10 minutes one way in Nebraska, drive 10 minutes the other way, you're in South Dakota. So it's a really metropolitan area, about 180,000 people. And I was born and raised here, actually went to public school and then a small liberal arts college named Morningside College for my undergraduate degree, and then went off to the big university, the University of Iowa. I'm a proud Hawkeye, and I bleed black and gold during football season, and I obtained my law degree there at the University of Iowa, and then returned home to Sioux City to practice in my hometown.
Okay, you already gave touch that you're a lawyer, amongst other things. You're a lawyer, and now what was the first? I mean, was that what you wanted to be when you grow up? Oh
God, no.
Okay,
no.
All right,
no.
Okay, when you're a little Midwest girl in Iowa, what are you doing? I mean, how are you being raised up? How's mom and dad treating you? How's the family life?
Right, right. Well, I've been very, that's what I have a dichotomy where I'm traditional, but very untraditional. And it starts with my upbringing. I came from a divorced family, which back in the early 70s I was the only kid that only had a mommy. My parents got married and it didn't work out. And actually moved in with my grandma and my grandmother, and she raised me, and I was an only child. My mother never remarried, but I had her, my grandmother, my mother's mother, and then I had a set of godparents that were more like grandparents that was a elderly couple in the neighborhood, and they had never been able to have children. And that was my whole world, was grandma and grandpa, and then Grandma Rosie, who was a Polish immigrant and had come here on the Kaiser Wilhelm when she was 2 years old and became a naturalized citizen. She was always really proud of that. She was 4'8" and full of fight, my Polish grandma, and never went anywhere without a hat. She was a true lady. She had a huge, she's ingrained in me now that I'm older, and I'm starting to even look more like her. But there are days I think she's taking over my body. She lived to be almost 100. She was extremely, I say fiercely tenacious. She had no formal education beyond the 8th grade, but she was very street smart, and she was immensely proud of me. She used to call me when I was in high school and college and get the update for the week. And one day I said, why do you ask me all these things? And she said, when I run into the ladies at the grocery store, I got to be ready because I got to beat them. My granddaughter's better than their kids. And I only got one grandkid, so I got to have the full arsenal of what you're doing here. She wanted me to be the first college graduate in the family. I was. My mother had a 2-year nursing degree, but they wanted a 4-year college graduate, and I did it, and I did it on Mother's Day, and she said it was the proudest day of her life. I finished first in my class at Morningside College, and so that I was raised very traditional, very Catholic, you're a lady on Sunday. We wore hats and gloves to church, but very untraditional because I had a working mom who was a registered nurse, and she worked really hard. She worked with my grandma. We had this small nuclear family. And like I said, I would be in concerts and drama and those kind of, productions at school. And there would be my mother in her white nurse's uniform because she was either on her way to work or she took her lunch break to come see me. And that was very untraditional. So I had a strong female figure in my mother as a career woman. I always knew I was going to have a career. And then I had this fierce support with my grandmother. So very untraditional, but traditional upbringing, if that makes it right. White shoes only after Easter. I mean, very traditional, but in an untraditional way as well.
Oh, yeah, Rosanne. But it sounds like besides the grandpa, you had a lot of strong women in your family. And I'm seeing some parallels in your life and mine. My mom was divorced at an early age, but she's on husband number 4, and she's going strong. And then she became a nurse later in life. So,
good for her.
Oh, my
yes.
goodness. But she's one of those women that goes all the way, or one of those people that goes on the way, because I believe she's a doctor of nursing,
Yes.
So at least she's nurse practitioner, in that respect, and she became a teacher in that respect. So I had that strong woman in my upbringing. But I was born into a Catholic family as well. But because she got divorced, she wasn't allowed to participate anymore. Did you have that trouble, or did your mother have that trouble?
Oh no, we did that. So my mother, we did. She was married in the Catholic Church. And it's funny you should say that because when she came back here, she had annulment papers drawn up by the priest in Missouri where she had attended church with my father. And the bishop here in Sioux City tore them up. And she was not allowed to take communion ever. She wasn't excommunicated, but she was certainly treated much worse. And that really upset my grandmother. And, my grandma on her deathbed, one of the things that she wanted resolved, and the priest who came to give her, the sacrament of the sick, I said to the priest, this is something that is unresolved in our family. And I said, could you assure her that my mother will receive communion at her burial mass? And he said yes. And it was quite a moment when years, decades later at my grandma's funeral mass, my mother was allowed to take communion for the first time in, 30 some years. Wow. So we did see that. And, the priest did say there's been, the church isn't perfect, as we all know, and the organization of the church isn't perfect, but there's been some mistakes and we want to remedy them. And so, yes, we saw that as well. Absolutely, up here in Iowa.
Well, that is good news because, my mother, she's had some problems in that respect. And I believe because of the reformation of the Catholic Church, she has been able to go back to church, to Mass, and receive communion. So I'm very happy that your mother got to experience that as well, because it seems like the faith has been a through line in your family's life. Is that something that's still in your life and that you're involved in?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I didn't... I appreciate, as traditional as we were, my grandmother we attended Catholic church, but I wasn't forced. I didn't take my first communion, or I wasn't confirmed. They felt that I should make that decision when I was old. They didn't want to force it on me. And I did make that decision by myself, went back and took the adult education, RCIA is what it's called. Okay. And went back in my 30s and did that. And it has been an extremely important part of our life. And I guess I'm not the kind of person that maybe you'll see every Sunday at Mass, but I believe in practicing your faith, meaning that you're kind to people, you help people when they need it, that you reach out to people in need. And I will tell you that when my husband nearly was killed in a traffic accident that has really redefined our lives, that faith was incredibly important. And I absolutely know that the result in my husband's recovery, I've had numerous doctors say it is nothing. It is miraculous. And so I know that I have a miracle in my house. And I know that's because all of the people that were so dear to me, and actually I cared for them in my 30s, and they all had passed on by the time that I met my husband. I just say everybody cashed in their chips in heaven the day that my husband was hurt, because I think God saw that we were strong and knew it would be a trial, his rehabilitation. But I have these dear friends of ours that were our sponsor couple when we got married, Chad and I, my husband, and their name is Happy. Their last name is Happy, and they're wonderful people. And Grandpa Happy, who you could never be mad at, said to me, they brought us a meal when we came home from the brain rehabilitation center. He said, you've been chosen. You've been chosen for this mission and to demonstrate to the world that miracles can happen and things can be overcome. And I was very angry at Grandpa Happy because, of course, I'm in the midst of this horrific experience with my husband. He's still very injured. We don't know what our future looks like. And I love this man. I love Grandpa Happy. And I think, why would Grandpa Happy say that? What did I ever do to deserve this? What did my husband do to deserve this horrible accident where he suffered a traumatic brain injury and his legs were shattered? And then it kind of dawned on me about 3 weeks later, Grandpa Happy is right. God looked down and said, these people can handle it. These people are going to be my example. And that has been, and that is what we're working on now, is getting our story out. The nurses and the doctors have all said, you've taught us that medicine is more than a book. The nurses at the hospital, when he was so terribly injured and was at the level 1 trauma center here in Sioux City, we left for this very specialized brain rehab hospital in Lincoln, Nebraska. It's called Madonna Hospitals, and the miracles happened there. And they said, those people the nurses said to me, we marched out after your husband, and they put him in that special ambulance, and we all thought her life is over. And then 4 months later, my husband walked back in, shaky with a cane, but we did it. And we are that story when people say, there was this one guy one time. And if we can be that one guy that one time and give hope to a family, that's really what our new mission is. And for 2020, I'm writing a book, and that's the niche that my husband and I want to fill for people, to say, whatever happens to you, and a horrible thing happened to us. We had a fairy tale going on. We never thought we would marry. We met. it was a fairy tale romance. We had the big wedding. He took me to Paris on our honeymoon. We found our dream house, and literally he walked out the door and didn't come home. The worst thing, the worst nightmare you can think of came true in my house. And if we can be the beacon to tell people the worst thing can happen to you, and with hard work and tenaciousness and dedication, and I tell you, working day in and day out with that rehab, then that's our mission now.
I knew that was a big part of your story, Mrs. Plante, and I did get to listen to you and Leah Hatter on her Sash Says podcast.
Oh yes, darling Leah, yes.
Well,
yes.
I heard that after we had scheduled this podcast, and I figured, well, I guess I'm involved in Sash Says at some point. I do the voice on the voiceover work in the beginning and the end on that. But I did get to hear quite a bit of this part of your story, and I didn't expect that we were going to be delving into it, but I know that it's a big factor of how your life has turned out as up to now. I mean, we can talk a lot about how that affected your life, but to get the proper to know how your life was before this tragedy happened in your family. We have to know who you were before. So tell me about Rosanne in Iowa growing up. What did you do as a young girl? And then we can delve into how these things have happened. Now, you've already gone through what you did school wise, but any extracurriculars in your school time, high school, middle school, what were you involved in?
Sure. Well, I think I was your typical 80s kid. I was super involved in school. I did drill team and I did dance, and I was a classic cellist. I started to play the cello in 5th grade, and I played it all the way through college. I was just in everything, and my mother did run me back and forth to school from sun up to sundown some days, and it continued in high school. And I was super, super involved in high school, varsity cheerleader. I, in addition to playing in the orchestra and the local youth symphony, I also was the drum major, so I had an interest in conducting the band. I liked to perform. I was in the plays, and I was your typical outgoing, had friends in all the different groups in high school, excelled academically, and just was, a really happy, healthy kid in a day and age where there wasn't cell phones and Facebook and a lot of bullying. I mean, I look at schools now and none of those things happen. And I guess we should consider, if you're a child of the 80s, we grew up in kind of an idyllic world, and the fact that, you didn't have to worry if you were going to get, kidnapped at Walmart or sold into human trafficking. It was a very idyllic, lovely childhood. It was a little different because, of course, like I said, I came from a single parent household. So I learned very early the value of work, and my mother saved, and she bought her own home. And, I had a lot of chores because I had no dad, so I was very involved in raking and snow shoveling, and, maybe some things that some of my peers didn't, but that built a lot of responsibility very early. My mom was diagnosed with cancer when I was 13, and for a while it seemed very grave. And so I took on a lot of responsibility in the home with chores and helping, take care of my mother when she came home. We were very lucky. The cancer was caught all in a surgery. She didn't have to have chemo or radiation, but that kind of was a big scare. And so I guess I grew up really fast, and I was more mature than a lot of my peers just because of the single parentness situation and the fact we had that cancer scare. And my dad was in Missouri, and he did an exercise visitation. So I didn't know who those people were. And then college is where I really bloomed. I had a really competitive high school class, so I did well, but we had 8 valedictorians, and everybody was just top notch, and it was very competitive. And sometimes that was overwhelming. I mean, it was almost hyper competitive. I remember my mother being concerned that I was so ingrained in, who's going to win this contest. And it was just very competitive. And if you look at my high school class, we have several doctors, several lawyers, several really high ranking people. I mean, our class did very well. We were an outstanding class. But what that did was it propelled me when I got to college. That was the work ethic I had. So then when I went to Morningside College, that's how hard I worked all the time. And that propelled me up, high up in the college class. And in college, I even did more. I was student body president for 2 years, first woman ever reelected. Ironically, I lived at home because I lived about 2 miles from the campus, and money was an issue. I was putting myself through school. I had a pretty large scholarship, but if I lived at home, we didn't rack up that room and board bill. And so for a student that never lived on campus, I was in everything. Again, I did the drum major thing. Joined a sorority, held several offices in the sorority, had tons of friends in college. I mean, college was really the golden era. I look back and go, oh, those were the days, I got to do a lot of interesting things. I think that's when I started to really break out of the traditional shell. I wanted to do something off campus one summer. So I was the first student ever to go to the dean and say, I want to be an intern. And I found this program in Washington, D.C., and I want to go to school at Georgetown, and I want to work in Washington, and I want you to give me credit for it. And he went, okay. And so I spent a summer in D.C. with the Fund for American Studies on a full scholarship. I worked at the White House Fellows. I got to go with these high-ranking people, these classes of White House Fellows, and I got to meet the movers and the shakers of the day in Washington. The next summer, when I was waiting to go to law school, I did a summer program with the same organization, and went to Charles University. So I did a lot of things that were very different. I had a philosophy teacher approach me at the beginning of my senior year and say, here's a folder. I want you to think about this. And I opened it up, and it was an application for a Rhodes Scholarship. And I said, you're insane. I cannot apply. I am Rosanne from Sioux City. Like, this is a Rhodes Scholarship, and he said,
what is a Rhodes Scholarship for the people?
Well, Pete Buttigieg was a Rhodes Scholar. It's a highly competitive national contest where people are interviewed, and the top 32 people then earn a scholarship to Oxford University, and it's paid for by the Rhodes Foundation.
Yeah.
So when you hear the Rhodes Scholars, it's a big deal. It's a big deal. Yeah.
And you didn't take advantage of that?
I did.
Oh, you did?
I filled it out, and I thought everybody was insane. And I'm the only person ever from Morningside College to make the finals for the state of Iowa. And so I was one interview away from I was literally one interview away from the finals.
Go get them, girl.
I didn't get it, but no one's ever gone that far since or before. So, and to be in a room in Des Moines, Iowa, with people from and what was available was people you could be from Iowa or go to school in Iowa. So of course what happened was we had somebody from the Air Force Academy who didn't want to try out in Colorado because there was more competition, so they tried out in Iowa. There was somebody home from Harvard University whose parents lived in Des Moines. So everybody walks into this very fancy house in Des Moines, and then there's Rosanne from Sioux City. So I've always just kind of been Rosanne from Sioux City who does these crazy things, and sometimes they work. So same thing happened a few years after I was a lawyer. I tried out to be a White House Fellow. The group that I interned for, same thing. They are a group, highly competitive national contest with people in the early stages of their career. You interview, and if you end up being selected, it's 21 to 26 people a year, depending on the funding, and you work for a member of the cabinet. And once again, I made the Midwest finals, and I was there with a rocket scientist and somebody who walked in space, and you just think, here I am. And so I'm always willing to kind of try these crazy things. And sometimes you get a little bit further in the process than you think.
Rosanne from Sioux City, it sounds like you work hard and your hard work pays off.
Yes. We definitely work hard in this house. Yes.
And you strive for things. So do you have any siblings?
I have none. No, I'm an only child.
Only child. So mom got to put her whole love, her whole self, all of her energy into raising you. And that's fantastic. And you did have to grow up pretty quickly because you had to take care of yourself, I'm guessing, most times because, mom had to work.
Yes.
But she did support you in all of the extracurricular activities that you wanted to do. And did the label overachiever ever get stuck to you at all?
Oh yeah, a couple of times. And my mother also got a lot of heat sometimes from especially in high school, people saying, "Are you a stage mother? Are you pushing her?" And she's like, "No, she literally comes home with these crazy ideas and we do them." There was only a few things that she had to say no to, and it was always, financial reasons. I always wanted to try to compete in Miss America. I always wanted to be Miss Iowa, but the pageant community was on the other side of the state, and pageants cost a lot of money. And so she said, "You got to do the local pageants and hang it up." And I did. And then that's kind of why the pageantry crap happened later.
Okay.
That path in my life, because it was a bucket list thing that had been shelved and I thought was over. And then it was revealed to me, oh no, there's a whole world of married pageants. And so when I got into pageants, it was kind of to fulfill that one unchased dream that I had from those college days.
Well, Rosanne, let's find out. How did you become a beauty queen?
Well, once again, somebody sent me an application and I laughed and threw it in the garbage.
When was this?
That was back in the end of 2015.
2015.
We'd been married a little over a year. Chad and I got married in 2014.
Okay.
And
I do want to go through how you met. But go ahead. Continue with the pageantry.
Well, I'll link it there. But so I received an invitation via email and an application. And what had happened was I do a lot of speaking throughout the Siouxland area in the state as a Iowa certified master gardener. And I speak a lot about gardening and different topics. And somebody had turned me in because I had done so much public speaking, and they thought, well, this sounds like it's a Rosanne thing. And so I got this information and I was like, oh, there's a married pageant. And so I looked at it and I said, isn't this funny? Like, somebody thinks I could do this. This is hysterical. I said to my husband, Chad, and we were trying to start a family. And I said, wouldn't that be funny? A pregnant beauty queen. Wow, that's hysterical. I just got the best laugh out of it. And he kind of just looked at me and I said, well, what's the matter with you? And he says, and this was the very sweet part. He said, well, I always thought you were pretty wonderful. Maybe you should fill that out so the whole world would know it. And I said, no. And I thought that was very sweet. And I said, but no, I'm not doing it. So I threw it in the garbage. Sent me another email. And so I politely told them, oh, I lost that, right in the garbage. So I thought, fine, you know what? I'm going to fill it out and they are never going to call. I filled it out on my lunch hour and they called.
Of course.
And then there was no pageant in Iowa. Some Mrs. International doesn't have a pageant in every state, but they do vet you. You had to send a number of pictures. I had to have Skype interviews. I mean, it was kind of a process. And, once again, I thought, well, they're interviewing at least 3 or 4 people, I was told, and I thought it will never be me, and it was me. So they called and said that I had been selected, and I think 60 seconds of euphoria, like this is pretty cool, then turned into, oh my God, I have to do this now. and I'm 44 years old, and I have no clue what I'm doing. So, but I do know how to research. And because, of course, I'm an attorney and I know how to research. So I immediately started to research and started to look at what was expected. And I had a friend who had a pageant coach in Omaha, Nebraska, and we made connections with him. And, I look back on that first year and once again, we did the work. Chad had to have a platform. I knew I wanted gardening to be my platform. Chad and I sat down one night at supper and I said, well, they say you're supposed to have a platform. I want gardening to be my platform, but they say you should have a project. And he said, well, we raised all this food on our acreage and donated it to the local gospel mission food pantry. We said we were going to do that again. Why don't you just make that your platform? Why don't you teach people how to grow vegetables and donate to food pantries and feed the hungry? We know there's a need for food. And I said, well, why don't we call it the Green Ambassadors? And he says, I think that's a great idea. And why don't we make the frog the symbol? Because I have this thing about frogs. And over one night, one supper, we put the whole darn thing together. And I said, let's recruit 99 people to represent the 99 counties of Iowa. And we started to do that. And so I was born. And so the idea and the platform and my Mrs. Year and Mrs. Iowa started. And then I looked at Facebook pages and Instagram and figured out, how to make parade signs and how to get involved. And it was I just worked the phones and called people. And before I knew it, I had almost 100 appearances under my belt, by 3/4 the way through the year. And it was really fun. And we did it together. He built floats for me and was on TV commercials with me, and just we really became Mr. and Mrs. Iowa, and we had a lot of fun. Drove all over the state of Iowa, went to tons of schools and spoke, and whenever he could go with me, he did. So that's
being Mrs. Iowa 2016. That didn't entail you going to a pageant and parading around. It was a lot of videos.
It did. Oh, yeah. It did. It did. There was no Mrs. Iowa pageant, but yes. I did in July go to Mrs. International, where we packed up and we went to Jacksonville, Florida, where 61 other amazing women were. And some of these women had been at Miss USA, Miss America. Some of them had done a gazillion Mrs. pageants, and there was Rosanne from Sioux City. Yeah. And I said to my husband, I'm not the oldest, I'm not the fattest, and I haven't fallen in the shoes, and it's a win. And it was a real experience. My roommate was Mrs. Africa. We're still friends. She's amazing. We had the best time. I knew I wasn't going to win. I didn't win, but I fulfilled my Miss America dream. We had a great platform. I performed well. I mean, I was proud of what I did. My coach was proud, and we raised a lot of awareness. I was the first contestant ever to have gardening as her platform and food awareness as her platform. So I was really proud about that. And it was really where I started. And I look back on those early days, and I look at my headshot from then and now. And, it's a learning process like anything. You learn as you go and you learn as you do it. I've made some amazing friends now I have friends all over the world, the ladies I met. And we spent a week together in Jacksonville. So
every time I talk to beauty queens, whether it be on the podcast or otherwise, the through line is the long-lasting friendships. It's not like the movies. It's not like the Sandra Bullock movie where people are tearing each other's dresses in half or pulling each other's crowns or pulling each other's hair or fighting. A lot of it is sisterly love, and I like that aspect. I'm sure there's the one or two bad apples that push their ways to the top, and you could speak to this if you'd like, but for the most part, is it long-lasting friendships you make in the pageants?
It is, and I think, I'm going to say I've met a few of those apples that you talked about, but it's few and far between. And anybody who does pageants for any length of time, and obviously it was my first, I'd done two or three local pageants in college, won one of them, and then hadn't thought about a pageant in 25 years. And so I was just amazed. I tell people it's like finding a little boy and saying, here's a pair of cleats, and then sending him to the Super Bowl. And so I was just kind of in awe of the whole thing, of the production and the gowns, and just to get to be there and get all made up. It was just so fun. But no, it is about the sisterhood, because most of those women have been in pageants 10, 15 years. And the one thing that you will learn when you are in the pageant industry is you lose far more pageants than you ever win. For every girl that you see crying on the stage, you don't see the 5, 6, 10, 15 times they've lost. Some of them 5, 6 times at the same pageant. And so, that's what you learn. You learn to be the best version of yourself. And just like anything that's a contest, it's subjective. There's nothing objective about it. It's not like you can put numbers in a calculator and come out with an exact number. You can be the very best you can be. And if the judges don't, different judges, different day. That's what they always tell you. Different judges, different day. And as long as you're the best you can be, when it's your turn and you win. And otherwise you learn from it, and you are with these women and you do bond. And that's what the true prize is that. And I think that's why people keep doing pageants. I know that's one of the reasons I keep doing it, because I keep meeting the most amazing, empowering, connected women. And what we do is we connect. After we meet, we connect. And then we can all use our strengths to help each other, which we do.
Rosanne, you give good advice through any contest, whether you win or lose. Did you do your best?
That's right.
Is very important. Now,
Yes.
speaking of doing your best, I'm guessing that there was a talent of some kind. And did you have a talent? And please say cello. Please say cello. No, what was your talent when you did these contests? At least the one in 2016, or the one in Jacksonville. I'm sorry.
Sure. Well, there is no talent in
What?
Mrs. Pageant.
What?
And no talent, and which is good because I quit playing the cello in law school, and I can pick it up occasionally, but I'm not at the level I used to be. No, it's 25% evening gown, 25% fitness wear outfit, and then 50% is your platform, which is the pageants I choose to do are platform based, which means there's a community service element to it, and so 50% is your interview, your community service, your platform, and what you're doing in the community, and that's the kind of pageants I like to do. Not every pageant is like that, but Mrs. International is like that. And I've also done worldwide pageants, and they're like that. And my current title is community service based as well. And so no talent, but they do look at what you do with your platform.
What is your current title?
My current title, which I just took over at January 1st, and I can't be any more excited about it. I'm thrilled. I was going to retire after my Ms. Worldwide days, and then I came across a system, and it is new. It is the Ms. Agriculture America system, but there's several divisions, and so I am Mrs. Midwest Agriculture America. And from the name, we are agriculture based. And we have two wonderful directors, and Shannon Lombard is the main director, and her mother, and they are ranchers in California. They come from a family of ranchers, and they share a love of pageantry, and they ran Miss California, as in Miss America locals, for many years. And they said, wouldn't it be great to take our passions of pageantry and agricultural education and put those together in a system? And they did it. And I happened to find them on Facebook. And it was funny because I reached out because I was so curious, because obviously agriculture and gardening is my platform. And I reached out, and it ended up being somebody who they also have a jewelry business, an earring business for pageant girls and ladies. And I had been a model for them. And when I got the email back from Shannon, she's like, Shannon, it's Rosanne. It's Rosanne that you model for. And I said, oh my gosh, are you kidding? And she's like, no. And so it was just a natural fit. And once again, I said, I would love to be interviewed. And so they right now are in their inaugural class. And so once again, I went through interviews on the phone with their panel and their board, and they are awarding titles all the way from county and city titles all the way up to regional titles. So I hold the highest title I can hold until I go to the national competition. And they have over 40 title holders in the different age groups and the different divisions, but all of us are tied together with agriculture. So we have ranchers, we have people that are involved in FFA, we have 4-Hers. I was the first master gardener. I'm the first person from Iowa. We have Mrs. contestants. We have Ms. MS contestants, so ladies that are either married or were previous married, or maybe they are divorced. Mm-hmm. And we're going to have our first national contest, our first national pageant, either at the very end of this year or the very beginning of 2021 in California. So I'm thrilled that now the system I am in is all about agriculture and education, because, the average kid, if you take the average young person today and say, where does your apple come from? They'll look at you and say Walmart.
Yeah, my father-in-law is a master gardener, and I saw that you are a master gardener.
Yes.
I tried to sit him down and have him explain to me what that entails. How did you become a master gardener, and what does that entail?
Sure. Well, I'm an Iowa certified master gardener. So I bet your breath. Okay. So all across the United States, there are something called extension services, and usually they're an extension of a university. So in Iowa, it's an extension of Iowa State University, which is our ag school. Okay. And there are master gardeners throughout the United States. And in Iowa, what is required is that 14 years ago, I took a course at this time of year, and it was twice a week. I went to school Monday and Wednesday evenings at the extension office for 3 hours, and we had homework and assignments. We had exams every week. So
what was your homework?
Two very large 3-ring notebooks with worksheets and research, and you had to look up plants, and when it got nicer weather, you had to go out, test your soil. We had everything from botany lessons to soil density lessons to epidemiology to, many, many different things, turf grass, water, conservation, all of those kind of things. It was an extensive 3.5 month program. And then one Saturday, we all traveled to Iowa State University, and we did research and lessons and presentations at Iowa State University, where all the Master Gardener students came together. At the end of that, if you passed your exams, you were a Master Gardener intern. And what that meant was you had completed the coursework, but a Master Gardener, a certified Master Gardener in Iowa, there is a service component to it, as in community service. So when you become an intern, you then owe the community 40 hours of community service before you become certified. So I spent my 40 hours on one project. Now, some people go spend 2 hours, at this community garden and 3 hours over here. I decided that at the time, my very then elderly Polish grandma was in an assisted living facility. She was 97 at the time, and she loved to garden. She taught me to garden, and my godfather taught me how to garden. And so I had that seed planted very early. No pun intended.
Very intended.
Yes. But she was in a dementia Alzheimer's unit. She had dementia. And so what they did was they had courtyards that were contained, so individuals could go outside, but they wouldn't, it's called elope. They wouldn't leave the premises. And I noticed that these courtyards were kind of drab, and nobody really took care of them. There weren't many flowers. And so I approached the director of the assisted living and said, I have 40 hours to donate. I'd like to do it here. I come almost every day to see my grandma. We used to garden together. I would like to do it here so she can enjoy it. The other residents could come out. The ones who are able to participate, we could do some gardening therapy. And what do you think? And she said, you don't have to sell me on it. So for that summer, I did all of the gardening and all the landscaping at the assisted living.
Oh, that's excellent.
It was really an amazing time. People would come out. More people came outside. And my grandma used to love to get pushed out in her wheelchair. I'll never forget Sally. Sally was a sweet lady that lived with my grandma in the facility. And Sally had been a very fine lady in her day and married to somebody very astute in the community. But Sally didn't have any family in Sioux City. And so she was this darling lady, and she was very far into dementia, but she presented really well, but she thought it was 1965, but she was so cute. And, Sally got to thinking that I was her gardener, because I believe Sally probably had a gardener back in the day. And I let her believe it. I let her believe that she had hired me as a gardener. And she would come out and she would say, oh, you're doing such a great job. And we had the best time. And she would sit in the chair and sun herself with my grandma. And she just said, these are the most beautiful flowers I've ever had. And you're such a great gardener. I should give you a raise. And I played along with it. It was so cute. And that fall.
Do you feel that that's the way to deal with someone with dementia? Just give them a happy time.
Yes.
Go along with it.
Yes.
I think so too. You can continue, but yeah, I like the approach that you took with that. That's great.
Yeah, I was like, why remind her it's 2000 or whatever? She's in 1968. Let her be. And my grandma would regress to days gone by, and they just get upset otherwise. Well, so we had this glorious season. We had a garden party. I put on a garden party. She told everybody it was her garden. It was just the cutest thing. But then the fall came, and the garden dies, and she was sitting out there with me one day, and it was a beautiful, glorious October day, and I was cleaning out the flower beds, and I said, what do you think we should plant next year? And I planted some tulips, and And she says, "Oh, and she was telling me, and then shortly after Halloween, Sally turned, she became ill and she passed away."
Oh.
And, she said to me, I went in a couple times right before she passed, and she still thought I was the gardener, of course.
Yeah.
And I said to her, well, that's fine. Even though I was standing there in a business suit because I'd come right from my lawyer job, but she thought I was a gardener, which was fine. And so I said to her, and she said, I'll never forget that garden. That was the finest garden. And so I always think of Sally. I don't remember her last name, but I just think, I was so glad I was able to give Sally her last garden, and it was very fulfilling, and I'll never forget, sweet Sally at the nursing home. So.
Now, that is a beautiful story, Rosanne. That is fantastic. I think anyone, if they have the chance, if they have the means, get to an assisted living facility and volunteer there, because, these people, hey, sometimes they're just lonely. I think.
Well, and you know what I learned? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you know what I learned? And my mother had been a long-term care nurse, and she had this incredible gift. She could sit with people who were dying, and it never bothered her. And when I was in high school, if she wasn't home by a certain time, I'd say, and she would usually call and say, I'm helping somebody. And that was code for I'm sitting with somebody as they can pass, because my mother never wanted anybody to pass away alone. And my mother could do that. She could sit there with somebody dying. How many people can do that? And that was her gift. That was her special nursing gift. And, one thing she taught me is, and I'll never forget this other lady, and I don't remember her name, but she had been a very high-ranking educator in the Sioux City area, a career woman before there was such a thing. And she had been hit by a car, and I think now looking back, now with my experience with Chad, I think she had a partial brain injury. And she wasn't always very nice to the staff. And I think she was frustrated. I think there was a part of her that knew she was, declining. I can only imagine how I'm going to feel that way someday. And there was a lot of frustration, but she would sit, especially in the colder months and days, she would sit by this fireplace at this assisted living, and I would have to come in the door and through this kind of grand living room and then go to the dining room where my grandma would be, and I would help feed her at night. But anyway, I would walk through there, and this lady would say, "Come over here." And sometimes I would be in a rush. Sometimes I would be late. Sometimes I had just been in court and I was upset or flustered, or, it was, how it is at the end of a day and you're running off to the next thing. And she would say, "Come over here." And I would go over there, and she would want to look at my suit or my dress clothes. And I found this to be incredibly inconvenient at the time. And I was younger than I was then. And my mother said to me one evening, "Did you ever think that she wants to look at you because she used to go to work dressed up? Mm-hmm. Did you ever think, Rosanne, that she wasn't always in this nursing home? She was somebody like you are." And, I thought, rather than being all self-absorbed, like some people in their late 20s, early 30s are, maybe you should think of, and it just hit me. And so then I took 5 minutes, and I would always stop, and that's what she wanted. "Oh, let me look at your pretty shoes. Let me look at your jewelry. Let me look at your suit. Oh, you have a new suit." And she kept track. Yes, this is a new suit. And when she passed away, I went to her service.
Yes.
And it was really something, because we sat at this service, and these people, she never married, she had no children. And I always wondered about that. Well, her fiance was a Navy pilot, and he was shot down in World War II, and it broke her heart. She never wanted to get married. Didn't know that. Okay. So then they talked about how she was this groundbreaking educator in Sioux City. And then they talked about the grand house that she bought and furnished by herself. And then she talked about how she threw these lavish dinner parties, and the dishes were beautiful, and how she was the consummate hostess, and how she was this elegant woman who donated all this money to the Sioux City. All of a sudden there was painted this amazing woman that had this life way before she was the crabby lady in the wheelchair.
Yeah. You saw
and
a much bigger perspective there.
Yeah. And people need to remember, when you go to the nursing home, that is just a minute in that person's life. They were a baby. They were an athlete. They were the Star Trek person. They were the bride. They were, they were all those things that we are now. They're just at the end, and people need to look at people in those places differently. And I learned that lesson.
Oh, yeah. I used to run a karaoke show on Thursday afternoons at one of the local ALSs. I need to go back there and do it again, as there were so many talented people there. And I mean, yes, I used to sing to them, but the ones that I would just take the mic out to them, and they could just sing whatever they wanted to sing. If they weren't singing the right tune, that's fine, but there were a few that were very good singers. So you'd be surprised at the people. People are, yeah, you're right. People did something else before they got into the assisted living facility. Oh my goodness, you brought back memories, and you did take away a lot of good stories and build some relationships, and probably gave them quite a few happy memories as they went along, as they passed along to the other side, wherever that may be.
Right.
So,
you asked how I met my husband. That's
yes,
a cute story.
You did mention Chad in passing when you heard that she might have had some brain damage. So let's go back. Let's circle back to the meeting of Chad and Rosanne.
Sure. And the old adage is true: when you're done looking, it happens. I was 42.
Oh my.
I did take care of my Polish grandma and then my two other elderly relatives. And when you work full time as a lawyer, as a litigator, as a trial lawyer, and you're trying to help three elderly people and sell houses and get them in nursing homes, and then we had some issues, and then they came home to pass away, and it just doesn't leave much time for a dating life. And so I kind of thought that ship had sailed. And though I was upset with it, I made peace with the fact that not everybody has to be married. Not everybody has to, I thought maybe I'd adopt a child. And I made peace with the fact. It's not that I hadn't looked. It's not that I hadn't tried. I just never found the right guy. I had a couple serious relationships as an adult woman. But it just never worked. Yeah. I was either Rosanne, too much to handle.
You were the popular kid in school. You were the cheerleader, the band leader.
I had lots of I had lots of boyfriends growing up, but I was very career driven. Mm-hmm. I wanted to go to law school. I did have a serious relationship in college, and he wanted to get married and have kids, and I wanted to go to law school, and he went to chiropractor school and got married, and I went to law school. And I said to everybody, it's okay. I didn't love him. It wasn't meant to be. He got what he wanted. I got what I wanted. So, I really thought I would just meet somebody after I had my education. It didn't really work. It didn't work out. I seemed to be, I made the mistake I think so many women make, and that is you put yourself, you put so much effort in trying to figure out what a man wants that you're not true to yourself. And so, one time I had this really snotty plumber in my basement, and I was in a business suit, and he said, "What do you do?" And I said, "I'm a lawyer." And he said, "Well, guys don't like women in suits if they can't cook or something." He made some sly comment that then I took to heart, and I ended up embarking on like years of cooking lessons and culinary lessons. And because I thought I was, there for a while, I thought I was a professional, but then I wasn't domestic enough. So then I spent oodles of time and money taking, like I said, cooking classes and decorating classes. And I mean, literally saying I have to be Martha Stewart too, because no man's going to want a professional if I can't cook and bake and garden. And, that's kind of where the master gardener thing came in too. I got to garden. I got to do everything perfect, and I spent all this time in my 30s taking care of people and trying to make myself into what I thought people wanted. And it was exhausting, and it never worked. And so I said, enough is enough. I'm done. And I had great peace. So about, 2-3 months later, at this point, I had also had this grand idea that I thought I wanted to be a college professor because, being a lawyer isn't enough. Let's be a college teacher. So I had gotten a job teaching, and then I got recruited to put together and create a paralegal studies program at the local community college. And they ended up hiring me, and I'd had my fill being a litigator. It's very stressful. It's very intense. And I said, I'm going to go teach. I really love teaching. I love the students. I'm going to go be a teacher. So I left the practice of law, and
Mrs.
kept my
Rosanne, let me
license,
stop
but
you there.
became.
What kind of law did you practice? What kind
I
of
was
work
a
did you do?
I went to court. I was a litigator. I did a lot of things. I was a city attorney. I was a county attorney. Um, um, I always went to court. I was always, I did jury trials. I like the drama. I mean, I think there are some lawyers who they want to sit at a desk, and I like to go to court.
How many hours a week does
So,
that entail, or is that all the
a
time?
lot, all the time.
You're
You work
thinking
on
about it
weekends, you work
constantly.
at night,
Yeah.
you work. Yeah, it's all the time, and so I just kind of got sick of that, and so I became this teacher, and I was teaching at the community college, and they have in-service. I'm sure you've heard teacher friends say, "Oh, I got to go to in-service meetings." Teachers have these meetings once or twice a year. So I was teaching an in-service, and they asked me to do a program about classroom management.
Yeah.
Classroom management. It was interactive. It was scenarios, and I had hoped people would participate. So I was one of the keynote speakers, and so the auditorium filled up at the community college with my peers. And this is when the whole college gets together, so the business teachers are with the mechanic teachers, community college, there's, plumbing and electrical and all that kind of stuff. So
This is getting all the instructors on the same page then.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so I go in, and I'm given my spiel, so to speak. And there's this blonde guy up in the back, and he starts to participate. And I'm like, thank you, Jesus. Someone's going to say something, right? And so it's going pretty well. And then it's to the point where, like, the guy in the back will not shut up, right? And I'm like, dude, enough. Like, I got to get through this presentation. So we get through the presentation, and there's a break. And then I have to do it again. And so we go to break, and this guy shows up at the table, like the snack table we're at. And I'm like, oh, isn't that the guy from the back? And he's, friendly, great presentation, blah, blah, blah. Okay, thanks. I got to go. I got to go repeat this, right? So it's the end of the school year, and things are kind of busy. And, I'm not looking anymore. I'm done. No more men. I'm done, right? Mm-hmm. So he tells his version of this story, and it's kind of funny because at this point, he chases me for 3 weeks, and I'm clueless. I ignore him. I blow him off. I'm not seeing him, because I'm done with men. So finally, 2 people office in my area that work with him, and he says to these 2 guys, these 2 older gentlemen, how the hell do you get her attention? And they're like, we can stand by the coffee machine, or you could send her an email. So he does both, and he sends me an email, and he asks me out, and he says, what are you doing this weekend? How about dinner? And I had not had a first date in a long time. And I responded, are you asking me out? And then I promptly went to the copy machine to make copies, and I broke the copy machine. I jammed it. So obviously, I'm standing there trying to dig paper out while he is waiting on the other end of a computer thinking, oh my God, I've just asked a married woman out. I've offended her. And he said he almost typed in, never mind, forget it. And then I come back and say, well, yeah, dinner would be okay. And how about a movie? Because I am, I think, I don't care, and he says, okay. And so we have our first date, and it was kind of truly like a fairy tale. He also was older, from a divorced family, didn't ever think he'd get married. And he had never been married.
Wow.
Didn't have kids. I'd never been married. I didn't have any kids.
Wow.
I had just spent 8 years caring for elderly grandparents, losing them. It had been a very sad time in my life because I had loved those people and lost them. And he was really the rebirth of me. I mean, he brought fun back into my life. He brought excitement. He brought normalcy. He brought, I had such a sad time before he was in my life because I was saying goodbye to these people that I love so much. And I think by the end of that, so we met in about April, we went on our first date in May. And I think by the end of that summer, we knew that something was going to happen. And so we dated a little over a year. And then so we dated a year, and then actually it was a year and a few months, but we have this in-service in the spring and the fall. So at the fall in-service, we met in 2012 at the beginning of the year. In the fall of 2013, at in-service, we had the whole school was there, all the teachers and administrators and everybody. And I was called, it was the closing session of in-service, and I got called to the stage for it was a made-up award, but he had planned it all. Okay. And so they got me up on the stage, and instead of an award, he came out and he proposed in front of the whole school.
This guy.
Yes. And we have video. It's actually on my Facebook page. I'm very surprised. And then we were married the following, that very next June, June 21st. And we got married on the first day of summer, 2014, the longest day of the year. And we thought it was fitting since I was a gardener and my last name was going to be Plante, Plante. And so it was a garden themed wedding. And yes. And so it was really a fairy tale. He took me to Paris on my honeymoon. We put a lock, on the fence. That's a big thing. You put a lock on the fence.
On the Eiffel Tower, yes.
Yeah, ours is actually on a bridge by Notre Dame that looks over the Grand. Well, it used to look over the Grand Lady. Of course, she burnt down now, but yeah, the Notre Dame burned down.
That's right. That's right. I remember.
That's right.
Recently,
I know. I cried. It was horrible. And then we spent a week in Poland and actually went to my grandma's ancestral home. So Then we came home and he found a beautiful acreage and we bought that together and we moved into that in August of 2014. And so we really had this fairy tale, and
the man
that
sets
everybody
the bar
even
high,
said,
I'll tell you.
It does. It does. It really shows you it's never too late. You never know what's going to happen. And then we tried to start a family, and they had thought that wouldn't be successful because of my age. But the minute they said it wouldn't happen, it did. It did, and tragically, we lost that baby in 2016, just about a month and a half before the pageant. Actually, a lot of people didn't know I was pregnant during my year as Mrs. Iowa. And so 16 was hard because we lost the baby. And then, of course, he was injured in November. So behind the glitz and the glamour, what people didn't know was there was some pretty heavy stuff going on. Mm-hmm. But that's kind of part of me. The show must go on and you've got to go on. And so there was a whole different side of the Mrs. Iowa year that a lot of people don't know about.
Well, tell me about the injury, Mrs. Plante.
Well, like I said, we'd had the miscarriage and we kind of gotten through that the best you could. And then it is truly what they say. Your life, tomorrow is not promised, and your life can change in an instant. And my husband had left the college, and at WIT, I was a teacher. I was actually on sabbatical. It was a year. I had a year off with pay. And actually, I was going to start a law firm, and I was working on that. And so he had left, and he had become a plant engineer for Palmer Candy. They make the famous twin bangs, if you ever had a twin bang. And he was going to work. He went to work really early. He left the house about 5:20 every morning. And he went to work. It was just a normal Tuesday. And the one thing about it was that I didn't feel real well. And so I got up and I put his lunch on the table, and I would usually get up and then go hug him goodbye and give him a kiss before he left. And that morning I really didn't feel well. And he said, I'm leaving. And I said, your lunch is on the table. I don't feel good. And he said, it's okay. I'll see you tonight. And I said, okay. And then I went back to sleep, and then I got up about 6:30, and I have a best friend, and we talked every morning back then, and she called, and she had gone out on her porch. She smoked, and she said, God, there's just like a gazillion like sirens and cops, and something's going on. And it was unusual that I didn't turn the TV on in the morning. I usually did, and that morning I didn't because I was getting ready because I was having a client come to my house. And so I said to her, well, I've got to get the kitchen, picked up because my office was under construction in our home. And I said, got to get ready. These people are coming to talk to me about this case. And I'm expecting the process server with some papers for another client. And so just about then, it was like 7:15 in the morning. The doorbell rang, and I could see that it was a sheriff, and that's who delivers papers. And so I said, oh my God, the sheriff is like uber early today. Like, I got to go. And she's like, oh yeah, I'll talk to you later. And we talked like 4 times a day. And I said, okay, bye-bye. And I went to the door thinking, and I'm in pajamas and a robe. It's November 15th. It's chilly. And I open the door and there's the sheriff. But he doesn't have an envelope. He's got a driver's license. And I thought, well, this is weird. And then he said, who are you? And I said, well, who are you? And he said to me, no, who are you? And I said, I'm Rosanne Plante. Do you live here? I thought, well, duh. I'm, yes, I live here, sir, And then he said, who else lives here with you? And then I thought, now this is bizarre. And I said, my husband and I have this really elderly little puppy dog. And he said, who's your husband? And I said, my husband's name is Chad Lee Plante. Can I help you?
Yeah.
And at that moment, when I'm starting to get pretty aggravated, I looked down at his hand and he had my husband's driver's license. And I think in that very moment, I knew something very bad had happened. Because you see these interactions on TV, in the movies. And he said, may I come in? And I said, yeah. And then he said, I regret to inform you, your husband's been in a very terrible accident and you need to go immediately to the trauma center in Sioux City. And I stood there and, it's just like you can't even think. And he said, ma'am, you need to go now to the trauma center. And I said, okay. And he said, do you have somebody you can call? And I tried to call somebody and they didn't answer. And so I've got this sheriff standing in my house. And so I said, I need to get dressed. And he said, yes, you do. So normally I would never leave a man I don't know in my house unattended, but I went and I literally picked up, I had folded a pair of jeans and a sweatshirt I'd taken off the night before. I was going to take him to the laundry. I literally put on the clothes from last night, slipped on some shoes. And I remember looking in the mirror and thinking, if I comb my hair in a ponytail, my husband could die. So I just took a clip and put it in my long hair. And then I said, will you take me to the hospital? And he said, oh no, then you won't have a car. So I drove myself into town. I didn't know anything at this point. I didn't know how he had been hurt. I mean, I knew it was a traffic accident. I didn't know where, how bad, nothing. So I get in my car and I go the one way it is to go into town. And all of a sudden I run into all of this traffic. Well, my husband was hurt on one of the main intersections. He was only about a half a mile from work, and it's how you go into town, and it clogged up the whole city. Schools started late because of this accident. I mean, and it was a major intersection, and what happened was a city bus ran a red light. She was behind a box truck and didn't check the light, and he was coming the other direction. And she turned, he was supposed to have the right of way to go straight. And instead she turned into him and hit his Chevy Tahoe going about 35 miles an hour. She was, and he flew through the intersection, rolled twice and ended up upside down, hanging out by his seatbelt. And our Chevy Tahoe was, you can't even tell what it was when you see the picture.
Yeah. Chevy Tahoe is a pretty big vehicle, but it's no match for a city bus.
No, a large city bus. And so I drove into the scene and literally drove into it, and they had it barricaded. As a former county attorney, I knew what that means. That means a fatality. And at that minute, I drove into the ditch and got out of my car. I remember I didn't even put it in park. It rolled, and then I thought, you've got to put the car in park. And I got out of the car. And I'm surprised I didn't get run over myself. I ran into traffic. There was traffic everywhere. I ran through the intersection, and somehow in my mind, I thought I was going to jump over the barricade. Now, mind you, I was no track star in my day, sir. No, but I wanted to see it. I didn't see the accident scene, but it was like, I could see it, but not up close. I wanted to see it up close. And the policeman was like, he's not here. And get back. And I said, I'm the wife. And I'm crying and I'm sobbing. I have no coat on. I remember the tears were like burning my face because it was cold. I had no socks on. It was just crazy. And I stood there and I screamed, like, I'm the wife. And he's like, he's not here. And then he put his gun on But then he put his hand on his gun, and I thought, well, shit, I'm not going to get through here. So I go back to my car, and then I can't get back in line. And then some woman finally lets me in because I'm screaming, it's my husband, it's my husband. I'm hysterical. And so she lets me in. Takes me forever to get to the hospital. I do get through to the emergency room, find out he's alive, that he has 2 severely broken legs, but they tell me he has no internal injuries in his, torso. And I say, and what about his head? And they said it looks fine at this point. So I get to the hospital. My friend, I have now called my best friend back. She now has turned on TV. She's put 2 and 2 together. They have a sky cam. She has seen the car. She has realized it's our car. She meets me at the hospital. He had a huge contusion on his right side. He had tib fib break. His bone was sticking out. The other leg, it was the upper leg, part of his leg that was broke. They immediately put him into surgery. And until 5:00 that evening, I thought we had 2 severely broken legs. We knew his back wasn't broke, so we knew he probably wasn't paralyzed. And I thought, okay, we've got 2 broken legs, and he's intubated and he's knocked out because he's been hit by a bus. At 5:00 that night, a neurosurgeon walked in and said, I want to speak to you, and took me, and a sorority sister, an old friend, happened to say, I'll go with you. And he took me back to a room where they had numerous screens, and they had CAT scans on the screen that were Chad's CAT scans, and they looked very normal to me.
Yeah, well, what do I know about that, right? What do you?
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, well, his head's not cracked open.
Yeah, that's the one thing you didn't study in school.
Yeah, exactly. And and I didn't know. I had never really known anybody know much about closed head injuries. So I say, well, his head's not cracked open, and he very calmly says to me, da 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 da, and he start, and I say, get to the point. Like, what are you trying to tell me? And he says to me, he has what's called a traumatic brain injury. It's the equivalent of like he has a axiom shear and a severe level 5 axiom shearing injury. And I said, what does that mean? And it says he's like, shaken baby syndrome. Like his brain bounced from one side to the other, and he has tore all these micro nerves, and all of these things control all of the things in your body, and his brain is going to swell up, and you need to call a funeral home. And at that minute, I was like a Salvador Dali clock, and I slid, slid under the desk. I literally just turned into goo.
You melted.
And my sorority sister had to pick me up, and she said, you're going to have to come into that waiting room and it was all of our closest friends and all the people who'd been in our wedding. And she says, you're going to have to come in and tell these people that, because she's not going to be able to do it. And I don't know how I got from one room to the next. I really don't. And so he told those people. He was not a very nice man. He walked in and said, well, this is why I drink at night, because I have to deliver bad news. He was horrible, the first doctor. And he told them the same thing. People, grown older men left crying out of the room. He said, if he lives, he has a 3 to 5% chance of living through the night. If he does, you don't want him to. My advice is to just his brain's going to swell. Just let the brain swell up and he'll die. And that'll be it.
This guy.
And I just
that is no way to deliver any news. Come on.
No. I called and he ended up being let go. That's another story. But I said, well, I want to see him. So we went into the room, and a couple very close friends went in with me, and he really didn't look bad. I mean, he looked bad, but you think hit by a bus. He's got a big black eye on one side, but other than that, and he's intubated, and there's a gazillion tubes everywhere. He's on a respirator, and I went over and I talked to him, and he squeezed my hand, and I thought, well, that's good. And so then the leg doctor came in, the surgeon, and I went over to talk to him, and I was crying, and Chad was squeezing my friend's hand, and he was markedly upset that I was upset. And so we sat with them for a couple hours, and they said, you really need to go home. And I said, well, I'm just going to go home and take a bath and get new clothes and come back, which I ended up sleeping 4 or 5 hours. But my best friend drove me home. And she put on an Academy Award-winning performance, because we got in the house, And we sat down and I said, well, this is not going to happen. This is not how we're going down. This is not how Mr. and Mrs. Iowa are going to go down. This is bullshit. I don't believe this doctor. He squeezed my hand. He's in there, and he's not going to die, and he's going to come home. And my friend said, that's right. And she said, we're going to get a second opinion. And we did. But the footnote to the story is she said, I think you should go take a shower. So she got me in the shower, and she then went behind my house and smoked a half a pack of cigarettes, called every one of my girlfriends and said, we are in big, excuse my language, shit trouble. She thinks he's going to live. We have all got to pretend he's going to live, and we have all got to pull it together for her.
Oh, my. Well,
and
good sorority sisters, though.
Yeah, no, she said to me, she said, you've done for us and we did for you. And everybody, this is going to be fine. And everybody's like, oh, my God. And so the next day we did get a second opinion. A Dr. Durwood came. I didn't know him, but apparently he is just about closer. He's just under God. He has saved numerous people in the Sioux City area. I didn't know when I asked for him that a teacher friend of mine at the college was his ex-wife. She had contacted him and said, you got to go see this guy. He was in the same practice as this other guy, other doctor. Dr. Durwood walked in. He's from New Zealand. He's got a cute accent. He said, everybody out, even you, meaning me. And we sat, and it was like waiting for the jury to come back. And he walked into the waiting room and said, I see a little hope. And he put the stint in Chad's head that the other doctor couldn't get in. And then we set vigil for 5 days as his brain swelled and came down, which is part of the process. And he made it through that. And then 12 and a half days after the accident, it was the day after Thanksgiving, I was sitting there and holding his hand, and he opened his eyes, which was very good because we wanted him to come out of the coma as soon as possible. And he did by himself. And we got him into Madonna rehab, which was a big deal. And once again, a footnote to the story that I didn't know was Dr. Durwood really felt he had a very slim chance at some sorta recovery. Sorta recovery would mean institutionalized for the rest of his life. They didn't tell me that. He told Chad later. I didn't tell Rosanne that because this woman doesn't take no for an answer. Oh. So I didn't even tell her. We got him into Madonna rehab. We left on December 19th from Sioux City and drove to Lincoln, Nebraska. He was in a fancy medical ambulance, and I was behind him in my Chevy Cavalier with all this stuff and our very old dog, and I moved in with him. I rented this horrible, crappy little house that was part of the hospital that they had available, and I stayed in this little crappy house, which I just slept in, and I went every day to Madonna, and we did therapy every day. I learned his therapy. I learned therapy at Sioux City so that he had to be able to do 3 hours of therapy before he could even go to Madonna. And the quicker we could get him into Madonna, the better, because Dr. Reeder from Sioux City also came to see him one day. And I said, Dr. Reeder, look, he's sitting up and he's receptive. And Dr. Reeder said, let me tell you something, Rosanne. One day the window's going to close, and you have to go as hard and as fast as you can through that window, because when the window closes, that's what Chad's going to be the rest of his life. Do you understand me? Right. And I knew Dr. Reeder from my grandparents' care, and he said, I wouldn't tell every family this, but you can handle it, but you got to know what you're facing. And so I ran like a woman possessed through that window, and I pushed, and we did weekend therapy, and he made it out of Madonna by February 13th. And then he went to a place called QLI in Omaha. And then we were there from February 13th, 2017 until the end of April. And then we came home, and we have no family in Sioux City. And we did it ourselves. And then I hired some help, and we did outpatient therapy, and he just finished all formal therapy last December. And then last year we did hyperbaric. And so it's been a 3.5-year odyssey, and my husband is home. Yes. My husband drives. They said he would never drive again, and he passed a battery of tests, and he has a license. What? And he drives. And my husband operates a riding lawnmower, and my husband gets up on his tractors. and my husband walks without a cane anymore or a walker, and the wheelchair's been donated, and my husband does his own checkbook. And I'm not going to tell you it's been easy, and I'm not going to tell you that there are still not very difficult moments. He has a frontal lobe injury. Yeah. That means he could have been mean. He could have been aggressive.
Right. It could have changed his whole outlook on life.
It could have been The Vow, the movie, where he looks at me and says, "Who the hell are you?" Mm-hmm. But there was a moment at Madonna Rehab when they were doing his assessment, and he couldn't talk because he had a trach still. And they said, "Who is this?" And he wrote, "My wife." "And when were you married?" And he wrote, "Our wedding date." And they said, "Where do you live?" And he wrote our address. And I think at that minute I knew we were going to be okay. And so I have a real miracle in my house. Now, they always say in brain injury that you have to accept that that the other person is gone, that it's a new person. And I never accepted that. I never accepted that I had a different husband. I accepted that I had a husband who had some challenges, but I never accepted, and some people do get a different person, but I willed it, I think, into existence. And Chad is Chad. And if you say to Chad, "Do you feel different inside?" He'll tell you that he has trouble thinking sometimes. He'll tell you that loud places bother him. He'll tell you that the TV needs to be a little lower, or he gets tired faster. But he says, inside, I'm the same. Well, and that's the miracle.
Yeah, from what I've heard from injuries, that every step towards recovery could be the last. And yes. It sounds like he's made leaps from where they thought he would have been, which wasn't anywhere. Wasn't even getting out of the hospital.
Yes. In August of 2017, we saw Dr. Durward again for our follow-up. And he kept looking at the file and looking at Chad. And Chad stood up by himself and said, "I understand you saved my life, and I'd like to shake your hand." And I thought the man was going to faint. And he's a very cool doctor. He's very reserved. Okay, he's not touchy-feely. But he looked at me and I said, "Can I give you a hug?" And he said, "You bet." And he said to me, "I never thought you'd get this far ever, let alone this fast." Yes. And I said, "Well, you'd never met me." And he said, "No, I'd never met you," he said.
No.
And so we truly have 1 in a million, truly, at our house.
Rosanne, that is a beautiful story. And I thank you for sharing that. I knew that was part of the story. I didn't know how far that story went. You didn't go that in depth with Sash Says, but my goodness, I'm so appreciative of having you on the podcast and hearing this. So how's Chad doing? What are you all doing for fun? What kind of outings do you go on, or how's life with Chad?
Yeah, well, we're working on those. We've been on a couple trips. Last April was our first trip since the accident. We got to go to Seattle. I was nominated for Most Inspirational Queen at the Global Beauty Awards. And I didn't win, and I didn't care because it was a win. It was a win just to go. It was a win to represent worldwide pageants. It was a win to go with my pageant director, who was also my pageant coach and friend, Troy, who was also nominated. I wore a Jonathan Cain gown. I got to meet Jonathan Cain. So we've done a couple of short trips like that. We also, Chad is also the first ever. I became involved with a group after he was hurt called Tiaras of Hope. And it's a group started by Diane Garvis in Florida. And she was inspired by the death of her father. And now her mother has passed, to give tiaras to people who have faced a tragedy. And I became one of her ambassadors, and she now has a nationwide network of ambassadors. And we went to the first ever Tiaras of Hope convention and training session. And Chad is the first male ambassador, so he goes with me now and reaches out to people who have gone through the fire, so to speak. And we turn ashes into beauty. And he is still very involved in the pageants. I met a lady. That's how I became involved in worldwide pageants. The pageant community, I also have to tell you, when there is a tragedy, they bind together. And when this happened to me, Chad had a network of people around the world, people were praying to Buddha. People were praying to the Pope. I want you to know that we were embraced by a world of women. It went out across the world to all 61 of those other contestants. It went out. Roseanne's had this tragedy happen, and the response was immense. And one of those response led me to a woman named Ellen McGovern, who was in Omaha, and she prayed for us. She ran a pageant system. I got involved in her pageant system. She wanted me to she had a queen that had to step down. She wanted me to step into that role. I was done being Mrs. Iowa. I said to Chad, this is kind of stupid. I don't have time for this. And he said, I think you should do this. I did seek out, and I want people to know there is no shame in seeking counseling. I sought some counseling during this as a caregiver because you need help. And my counselor said, I think you need something that's yours. So the pageants became therapy for me and became something that I did to help deal with all of when on bad days, it felt good to get dressed up and go out and help somebody else. And so Chad loved to do that stuff with me. So he still goes on appearances with me. He still helps me. Part of his therapy, he did, we turned the Green Ambassadors. We added another dimensions to it. At the QLI, they said, how can we get your husband involved in more occupational therapy? And we created he built a handicapped accessible garden. So we have now put together an entire gardening as therapy, occupational therapy program. And it was created with Briarcliff University's therapy department here in Sioux City. And so Chad now goes out and also speaks about how therapy and gardening has helped him advance. And so we do that. Really, we do normal stuff. We go to the movies, we go out to eat. You don't understand. I cannot tell your listeners enough when you almost lose everything. He is my only family right now. If he would have passed, I would have had to sell my acreage. My entire life hung by a thread, and you don't understand what you have every day, and you take it for granted until you lose every single thing. And you have no idea what a big deal it is when we got to go out to eat again and we got to go to a show again. Do you understand that when you can't walk and you can't move and you have all of these insurmountable, barriers to you, all the everyday stuff becomes a privilege. And so we do lots of normal stuff, but it's extraordinary stuff for us.
Yeah, you started from scratch, and
we did.
You're making your way back to the world, to a sense of normalcy.
Yes,
and you're doing it, but
with the greatest people all complained, oh, it snowed and everybody has to shovel. I took a video, and maybe you saw it on my Facebook page, and I say, there's my husband, and he's out there, and he's shoveling, and he's walking on ice, and he's using both his hands because he had a really weak hand that was drawn up, right. And he called it his chicken wing. And I said, nobody complain because my husband is shoveling snow, and it's a miracle.
That's right. What's your excuse, pal?
Right. And I just say to people, you just can't take a minute for granted. You just can't.
Well, all right.
I have gained such gratitude from this experience.
Rosanne Marie Plante, I know we still have other avenues to explore with you. And so, I don't want to take too much more of your time.
Yes.
But, but certainly you have so many, so many credits on your Facebook. Let's go down them and
okay.
Tell me the ones that you don't do anymore, and I'll stop there. But you have Families United Action Network, FUAN.
Oh, that's my new thing. That's my new thing.
Yes.
I'm a lobbyist. That's what, the Renaissance woman strikes again.
Yes.
I'm very, I love politics. Of course, being in Iowa, we've been the center of the political world until the caucuses. So during all of this, believe it or not, I worked, and I discovered that there was a judge in my judicial area that was ghostwriting, which meant he wasn't writing his own opinions. He was letting lawyers write the opinions. And I was one of two lawyers who I and a lawyer from Des Moines figured it out and then kind of clicked together. I went to the Attorney General of Iowa and begged for help. They did an investigation, and they, in fact, proved that this judge was doing this, and it was taking away people's children. And it was shocking that a judge had done this in Iowa. And I had the people in my office who had their children taken away. And so I have decided and learned from being a family law lawyer that our laws are not very well written in Iowa, and they need an update. So I joined forces with Family United Action Network, which is a group that is, we lobby for laws to strengthen Iowa families. And I am a huge lobbyist and proponent for Senate File 571, which is rebuttable presumption. What we're trying, many states have done this, including Kentucky, with great success. If both parents are able, willing, and suitable, if one wants 50-50 custody and the other says no, in Iowa it's a fight now. And our law would say you have to have a darn tootin' good reason and prove by clear and convincing evidence why. And I'm saying to people, the law, as we have written it, and I'm lobbying for it, is going to revolutionize family law and strengthen families in Iowa. So I'm very passionate about it. Our bill is still alive in the Iowa legislature. We made it through the first funnel last week. And so I'm a new that's new on my list of credentials, is that I'm a lobbyist. And so I'm lobbying to strengthen family law in Iowa.
I love hearing the passion in your voice, Rosanne. And I stalked your Facebook. How's meeting Mayor Pete?
Oh my God, he's a doll. He's a doll. I don't want to talk about what everybody's going to talk about with Mayor Pete, because I don't care. Love is love. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah.
But I see. I'm just in. I had political aspirations at one point that I had put away, and he sparked them back up in me. He's 38. And he is, he's kind of crazy like me. Like, he said, I'm going to run for president. I'm going to rent a space in the back of my doctor's office, which is how we started. Mm-hmm. My best friend from law school called me last May and said, I'm volunteering for this guy. His name's Pete Buttigieg. And I said, Pete who? And she said, Pete Buttigieg. And she said, he's amazing and he should be the next president of the United States. And she kept bugging me and she kept bugging me and she kept bugging me. And I went to see him in July and I liked him. And then, we had the crisis in the Mideast this fall, and I loved his answer. I have great respect for anybody who's put their boot on soil. All of my grandfathers served. My dad served in the Army. Chad is a vet. And the mayor, Pete, is he is what I hope America sees as the future. He's innovative. He's smart. But you know what? He is humble, and he's got a lot of compassion. And that's what makes him just absolutely stand out. And if you ever meet him, it's really magical. And I'll tell you, my friend back in my law school friend, she's on the other side of the state, and she is not like me. She's not a trial lawyer. She's a business. She has an MBA. She doesn't like to talk in front of people. And she had the honor of introducing him at one of the last town halls before the caucus. And it almost gave her a heart attack. Like, she literally called and said, I'm going to drop dead. And I said, no, you're not. And she introduced him, and she was so rattled. She came down off the stage, and she didn't even see him because she was so nervous. And he hugged her and said, thank you for standing up there and introducing me. The man had been on 3 hours of sleep for 3 weeks. And he took the time to say to my friend, thank you for being so brave. Thank you for introducing me. I really appreciate it. Then introduced her to his husband, and then got up and gave his pitch. And she called and she's like, he was worried that I was freaking out, and he's running for president. And I think that says it all right there. Oh,
the man ticks a lot of boxes, that's for sure. I mean, I hope the American people are taking a look at least, but yeah, he's impressed me to no end.
No matter what happens, he's made history, he has.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. So all right, the Touchtone Crystal by Swarovski.
Oh, my God. I love jewelry. I sell it because I like free stuff. Yeah. I'm a bling girl. I sell, you know what? It's a hobby. It's just fun. I like to I like to make my friends feel beautiful, so I sell jewelry.
Yeah, in your free time. Why not?
I do. It is kind of just like on my free time. It is, yes.
Yeah, I'm putting all these links in your show notes so that way people know all the different avenues of you.
Yeah.
So, and then let's see, The Green Ambassadors by Rosanne. You've already gone through that. I'll make sure I put that in the show notes. The Mark Devang, New York. You're a model?
Yeah. Mark Defang is a pageant and prom shoe designer. He designed a pair of shoes for me for Mrs. International. He had a contest where you could try out, and he picked people and he named a shoe after you. And I am one of his shoe models and spokespeople. And there is a Rosanne shoe on the Mark Defang collection.
Everybody go out and purchase that shoe right now.
That's right. It's on sale now, too, by the way, everybody. It's on sale. Yeah.
Okay. And the Queen Bee Boutique.
Yep. That's my friend Shannon, Mrs. Agriculture America. That was, Queen Bee. Yep. I'm a queen and I'm one of her models. Yep. That's her. Mm-hmm.
Oh, you're and then you're also a podcaster.
I am.
What
yes,
is
Sassversations with my dear. Yes, it was my dear friend Tiffany Purnell. She started it, and she has honored me and asked me to be a co-host, and we've been doing it for a couple of years now. Yes, and we interview pageant title holders and pageant kind of like Leah does, and we call it Sassversations. Get it? Your Sassversations.
I like it.
Yes, and so that's with my dear friend Tiffany Purnell, who is Mrs. Tennessee Captivating 2020.
I can't believe we're over an hour into this podcast, and that's the first time that you mentioned that you're a podcaster, and you didn't mention it. I did.
Yes. Yeah. I kind of forget everything.
No, I love it. I love it. How often do you put that podcast out? I need to listen to it.
We've been on a brief sabbatical because my dear friend Tiffany is completing her, she is getting a PhD in education. She's getting a doctorate. Excellent. So she's finishing up her paper right now, but we usually do 1 to 2 shows a month, and we're going to be coming off sabbatical here shortly.
So impressive. All right. Miss Nationwide Charitable Foundation.
Oh, yes. That's my pageant coach, Troy Fenhold Hasses. And Matt is the national pageant, my pageant coach and dear friend runs with his husband. And Troy has been invaluable in my pageant journey, and it's just his friendship during everything. And so he runs Miss Nationwide, which is like Miss America. It's scholarships and it's a service-based pageant, and I am his corporate attorney. Wow. And also on his board, so on his foundation board.
That's fantastic how it all comes around. And
it does.
I guess we finish up with I have the Facebook page for Mrs. Worldwide Pageant, and that's the current title that you're holding now?
No. I was Mrs. Iowa, and then I was Ms. Worldwide when Chad was recovering, and now I'm Mrs. Agriculture Midwest.
Mrs. Agriculture. Mm-hmm. Very good. I think we can finish it off there, and I see nothing but good things for you. I look forward to following you more.
I'm just been so honored and so pleased that you're willing to visit with me tonight and share my story and all of the organizations that I work so hard for. They're all so wonderful, and I encourage anybody who has any interest in any of them to contact me because they're all doing such amazing work, those organizations, and they're empowering people and helping people. So I just so much thank you from the bottom of your heart. I'm first and foremost an advocate for traumatic brain, and I like to say survivors and thrivers. And so if anybody out there is struggling with a TBI or they're a caregiver, please know that there's hope and there are people like me to reach out to. And I'd be happy to hear from anybody. So.
Well, I assure you, Rosanne Marie Plante, this is purely selfish reasons. I enjoy conversations, and I have totally enjoyed our conversation tonight. Well, how do the people get a hold of you? I have your Facebook page listed and your Instagram listed as well. Yep. You can go ahead and tell them out.
Yeah, no, those are the two best ways, is they can direct message me. Also in my Facebook, if you go down, also my phone number is available. My email is, it's really super easy here. There used to be a show called LA Law. I thought that's what it was like to be a lawyer. Ha ha. So So my license plate is RL Law. So my email is RLLaw96. I'm a 1996 graduate of the University of Iowa. So it's RLLaw96@gmail.com. And that's also embedded in my Facebook pages as well.
Rosanne Marie Plante, Rosanne from Sioux City,
Rosanne
Iowa.
from Sioux City. Yeah.
I give you the last words for the people. Thank you so much for chatting with me on the What Makes You Famous podcast. Just give a few last words, words to live by, words of wisdom, words that have helped you out. Last words for the people.
Last words for the people. I think those are just never give up and just keep going, because it gets better. It gets better. No matter what you're facing. Just keep on going.
I will cut it right there. Thank you, Rosanne. That was fantastic. Oh my goodness.
Well, thank you.
You have told this story, and it's a beautiful story. I'm very honored that you told it to us, not just me, to my listeners as well. But man, you've led an incredible life, girl.
Well, thank you. I have a publisher. I'm working on a book. So,
oh my goodness, you need to say something. I'm going to go back into it and tell me about the book.
Okay.
Or do you?
Yeah, no, I'm working on it. I have a publisher interested, and I am putting together. Many, many times I say something in jest, and then I work with it. But I used to say, I don't know how to do this. They didn't give me a brain injuries for dummy book when we entered this horrible fraternity or sorority group, whatever you want to call it. And actually I thought, no, how about a how-to manual when you enter this? And so I've read a lot of great books by caregivers or people that have suffered a TBI. There was the ABC News anchor. He was hit by a roadside bomb. He wrote a great book with his wife. I've read a lot of them, and I've decided that my book is going to be written in phases. Every chapter is divided, and I have a unique perspective because I was really involved in getting my husband's case ready for trial. So I have a legal perspective. I have a spouse caregiver perspective, and then I have a spiritual perspective. And so every chapter that I am outlining, I haven't really started to write yet, but I'm outlining right now, has these three areas, because I haven't found a book yet that addresses the multiple facets of helping your person recover from a traumatic brain injury. And I think that's what's out there. So I'm trying to fill a niche and help other families. And that's what I'll be working on this year when I put the book together.
Sounds like you're writing the book that you want to read.
Yes, I'm writing the book that I wish somebody would have handed to me. That's exactly right, because there were so many small, intricate things that made such big differences that nobody tells you. And so I guess it is going to be here's what I wish I would have known, but gosh, I want to help you now book. I want to hand somebody a manual and say, it's not going to be easy, but here's something to make it, to help you get further down the road and to give you hope. Because I think sometimes you're just faced with something insurmountable like this situation, and so many people just go, I can't take it. And people need to be given sort of a to-do list or a roadmap to keep them on that path and to keep them going through the really tough days.
Well, there you have it, party people. Rosanne Marie Plante. I knew it was going to be good. This lady has so many credits. Just on her Facebook page alone, all the different links that she has, things that she's doing concurrently. So overachiever, maybe a little bit, maybe, but that's a good thing. She had a mama that made sure that she had all the opportunities at her disposal. Whatever she wanted to do, her mom made sure that she could do it. And that's great. That's a good mama. That's a good family right there. If your kids want to do something, let them try it. Let them give it a shot. Perhaps they'll become a lawyer, beauty queen, a lobbyist, activist, and the unfortunate event that happened to her husband, she's turned it into a crusade of sorts for people with brain injuries. So it could have devastated her, and I'm sure it did for a little bit, but it hasn't knocked her completely down. She made a positive out of what could have been very bad negative. So thank you so much, Rosanne Marie Plante, for telling your story on the What Makes You Famous podcast. If you'd like to tell your story, I encourage you to give me a call at 501-470-6386 or email info@radiowhat.com. That's it for me. It's Keys Dan, radiowhat.com, djlittlerock.com. Peace. I'm out of here. If you like what you hear, follow What Makes You Famous social media. Use the hashtag What Makes You Famous. Follow on Facebook at What Makes You Famous. Follow on Instagram at What Makes You Famous. Follow on Twitter at Makes Famous. And follow on YouTube at Keys Dan. Leave What Makes You Famous podcast a review and subscribe. Listen to What Makes You Famous podcast on Podbean, iTunes, YouTube, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, and Spotify, and almost anywhere you find podcasts. Tell your story on my podcast, What Makes You Famous. Call 501-470-6386 and leave a message to set up a time. You can support What Makes You Famous using the PayPal link, paypal.me/KeysDan. Email info@radiowhat.com. What Makes You Famous podcast is a production of Keys Dan Enterprises Incorporated at keysdan.com. Thank you for listening.
Radio What? The music you want with some great quotes. There's nothing worse than aggressive stupidity. Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. The music you want. RadioWhat.com.
Hey guys, this is Shelly G. She said, what? Well, you are going to have to listen to the countdown to hear what I say. And make sure to keep listening to Radio What for more information and trivia. She said, what?